But going through those hard times, going through those sufferings, going through like together was just like, man, that bonded us so much together. And so we got to stop arguing about the color of carpet. We got to stop arguing about CT or not. We got to stop arguing about the stuff that we're spending all of our time staying away from making disciples, doing what God has called us to do.
All right, welcome to the official, unofficial Acts2 Network podcast. That's the official, unofficial name of this podcast. My name is Steven, and we are launching Lifelong Kingdom Workers from every college town. And today we are joined by Dhati Lewis, the founding pastor of Blueprint Church and president of MyBLVD. Thank you so much for making time for us today on this podcast.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, it's been very humbling to hear from you, not only at our plenary at the Acts2 Winter Conference, but also at your workshop. And there's a lot that I want to talk about. Oh, I have a lot of questions I want to ask, but we want to talk mostly about discipleship, which I know is one of your passions. But before we get into all of that, I just want to give you a chance to introduce yourself, some of your spiritual background, how you became Christian, and whatever else you want to kind of touch on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, again, my name's Dhati Lewis. I was son of a pro football player.
Okay.
I mean, if you had asked me what's my identity, I was just like, I am an athlete.
Yeah.
And I, pro football, I wanted to be like my dad, who played for the Saints, lived in Canada, all those things, grew up at Crenshaw, high school in LA, all of those things. And I was just like, I want to be like my dad. I want to be a pro athlete. And so everything. And so
what position did your dad play?
My dad played safety.
Okay.
I'm sorry, no, not safety. My dad played defensive end.
Defensive end. Okay.
And so his claim to fame was he was the first person to intercept Dan Marino his rookie year running back for a touchdown.
Wow, that's
right. And so as a
awesome.
D end, it was one of those, he got hit as he was throwing it and the ball bounced up and he caught it and ran it down.
Man,
so it was like
crazy.
one of those big, lumberjack going through.
Yeah.
So, But so I mean, but anyway, like my life was centered around sports. My life was centered as an athlete, and so when football was going well, life was well. When football was going bad, life was bad. But like people ask me, like, did you have a hard life growing up? I would have like, no, my life was pretty easy. But it was ultimately because of football. Because if you look at my life, I think about like I went through divorce. I was on welfare. We lived in the hood. Like after my dad's career was over. I had a mom, who was, became a drug addict and like disappeared for days. I didn't know where my dad was between the 5th grade to the 8th grade. I think about all the trauma,
like the high and the low.
all of that, all the trauma that has come from that. But people's like, well, did you have a hard life? I was like, no, because I had football, I had sports. And it was like sports settled me in a lot of ways. But then what happened is that out of high school, I didn't have a scholarship offer to a major Division I school. And I was just like, what? Like, my football career, what does that mean? And it was like, had a couple of small schools offer me. And so I was just like, okay, I'd rather go to junior college than to a small school. So I declined all the smaller school offers, went to a JUCO. And, but there was something in me says, man, like there has to be more than life than sports. And I just went on a search. And so basically, those first couple of years, first year and a half, I just went on a search. I ended up becoming a world religions major.
Yeah. You shared. Like to major in it, that's pretty serious. How did that?
Well, it just started off just searching. Like literally, I mean, I would just study Hinduism, like Buddhism, African tribal religions. It's like I would just study, like, all right, get it. And then I started like formalizing. I was like, I want to take a class on this, and I would start taking classes. And then I was just like, oh, I could make this a minor. Oh, I might as well just make this, and it literally just became, because I started off as a math major.
Oh,
right?
really?
So I started off as a math major, engineering, and I was an engineer major for like 2 classes. And then like I went there and the professor was just like, if you don't like what you're currently doing now, you probably don't want to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever went back to that class. That was my freshman year, and I think that's all I needed to know.
Okay.
Because I'm a people person, relational, all of those things. But I was good at math. So people was just like, oh, if you're good at math, become an engineer. And so I was just like, and then I was an engineer. I was like, this is not it.
So describe, like, you're studying all these religions. Did any of them stand out to you? I mean, eventually, of course, you became Christian, but like,
well, I mean, I think the Nation of Islam really actually stood out to me. But part of it was because their proactivity in the hood.
Yeah.
Right? I saw, and that was during a time when, like, there was a movie called Malcolm X that was out, and,
Denzel.
And you had Farrakhan and all of them. And during that time, they were the people that I saw.
Mm.
And there's like, I didn't see Christians out. I saw them selling,
Yeah.
whether bean pies and doing, like, I saw them out
Yeah.
and doing, and I was just like, I wanted a proactive, whatever I was going to do. And so oftentimes I was just like, oh man, I'm going to take the best of all of these things. And it's like, I'm going to make my own.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take the best of what the nation is doing. They're out here. And then, but my other friend, my best friend at the time, he was a Christian.
Yeah.
His mom was a Christian, and she gave me a Bible. And I was just like, oh, okay, I got to bring all this together. And, you know, and so there was a lot of things that stood out in a lot of different world religions. And so I was just like, if I can just take the best of all of these things and bring them together, I was just like, I can create my own. Again, I didn't have anything to work with because I wasn't raised in the church. And it was just kind of like, I just thought that's what people did.
Yeah. So then as you're taking it together, how did the turn towards Christianity and only Christianity sort of turn?
Because, you know, ultimately, again, I had this Bible. I started reading this Bible, and I started hanging out with. I got invited to church, and I remember, you know, as I was reading, I was just like, and I was just studying. I was like, there has to be more than life than sports, and I was just like, for many things and many times, people was really saying, hey, you're not good enough and you need a savior. And that's what Christianity spoke to me, because I grew up in the hood. I grew up around a family like that has been decimated by drugs and alcohol, but it had a negative effect on me because it ended my dad's career early. My mom became a drug addict, all these things. And so I was like, I'm never touching this stuff because I've seen what it does to a family. So I've never smoked. I never drank. I've never done any of that, even though my family was doing that, because I was like, I need to be an athlete. But now that I'm just kind of like, oh, there has to be more than this. I said, all right, I can't do this anymore. But so I was, quote unquote, a good kid.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was broken and that there was this God-sized void. And so I think about Ecclesiastes 3:11, where he says that God has wrote eternity on every man's heart. And that's what I feel. I couldn't articulate it that way, but there was just felt like there was this God-sized void in my heart that I knew that harder work, good behavior wasn't going to fill.
Wow.
That it was just something different, and Christianity is the thing that spoke.
Wow, that's
that
kind
to
of
me.
that's kind of amazing that coming out of the background you came out of, like all that trauma, like you shared, and all that, there wasn't like this, oh, I'm comparing myself to them, and you're telling me I'm like that, you know, like I'm a sinner, you know, but instead you realize you're able to see through all that and actually accept that Christian message. You're not good enough. You need a savior. So I think that's amazing. And I think it's also amazing that happened in college, just because, you know, our heartbeat is college and college ministry and that sort of thing. And so what like, did you get involved with the college ministry, a campus fellowship? Like kind of, how did that happen?
So basically I ended up, you know, that I accepted Christ going into my second year.
Okay.
And I was at Citrus College at the time. So I was in Cali.
Just reading the Bible.
Reading the Bible. And look, like, again, nobody shared their faith with me. Nobody came, you know. And so here's the funny thing. Like, I literally remember, like, because I started going to, like, church with my friends. And so I remember I was just like, you know what? This Sunday, it was like a Tuesday. I said, this Sunday, I'm going to give my life to Jesus. Because I thought the only way you can give your life is, like, the altar call at the very end. Like, I was like, that's the only way. So I was just like, so I remember going to church saying, I'm giving my life. Today is the day I'm going to give my life, you know, to Jesus. And I don't even know what the pastor preached on that Sunday, because I was just so excited that I was going to, at the end, I was going to walk down, you know, to things. So I don't know what our theology says about that, but somewhere between Tuesday and Sunday,
so did he gave an altar call?
Yeah, he gave an altar call. It would have been bad
if he didn't give the altar call.
I probably would have said, no, wait.
Wait, I need to.
Like, this is happening today.
Wow.
You know, and it was just one of those things. And so I ended up getting a scholarship to the University of North Texas, and then at North Texas,
was that a sports scholarship?
A sports scholarship. So ended up playing football. I was playing football during the time. Got a scholarship to the University of North Texas, and at North Texas, I met a group of people who was on fire for the Lord, and I was like, oh, I love it. Yeah. This was the first group of Christian friends that was on fire. Because again, my friends would have said they were Christian, but I don't remember literally having one spiritual conversation my entire upbringing.
Wow.
Like I just didn't. It just wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't like I wasn't antagonistic to Christianity. I didn't. You know. It just wasn't a thing. I do remember one time our coach in high school bringing us over to his house and letting us play games and and ordering pizza, and then we sat in a room. But I don't remember nothing he said or whatever. And I was just like, that was probably an FCA meeting or something
really?
like that.
Wow.
And so I think I probably went to an FCA meeting, but again, it was just so foreign to me. Like it just like it was that was the only time. And I was just like, because people always talking about overseas and all that. I was just like, man, somehow I navigated my whole 20 plus years, 21 years of life, never having like any type of real gospel conversations. And so people think like, no, America's saturated with the gospel already. I was just like, no, it's not. Like I'm a witness of that, right? Is that you can go so long without ever hearing it. So I had my first Christian friends, here in college, and they introduced me to a world of Christians that know like Bible and they understand their Bible, and I was just like, I love this, because
you loved it. Okay, it didn't like weird you out. Or...
No, it didn't weird me out because I'm like, as a football player, I was just like, I need to like. I didn't understand what it meant to be a Christian, but I was just like, I know like 2-a-days. I know like, practice makes perfect. I know. So I was like, let me get it. Like, hey, so I started going to study every single day. And I was like, because I'm going to know my Bible. I'm going to learn my Bible. I'm going to, and it was like, at first it's like, hey, if you got to get stronger, get in the gym. If you're going to get stronger, and that's kind of the mindset. So it wasn't grace-based. It was just purely like, let's get it. Let's go athletic.
Okay.
But it was what God used early in my my walk to fall in love with the Bible, fall in love with His Word.
Was there any books in particular or something in particular that like really formed your early hunger for the Word?
Well, the best book that helped inform me, and I still read it yearly, is a book called 30 Days to Understanding the Bible.
Okay.
30 Days to Understanding.
Who's that by?
By Max Anders.
Okay.
Max Anders. And again, here I was like, Lord, I just need to know my Bible. I don't know my Bible. And I remember going to, at the time, Family Christian Bookstore.
Okay.
It's when they had stores. You actually had to go to the store.
Yeah, I remember
so
those
Family
days.
Christian Bookstore. And I was just like, Lord, I just want to know my Bible. And it was like, like there was a Bible that says 30 days to understanding the Bible. And
That's
I was
what I
like,
need.
that's it. I picked up that book. No one told me to pick the book up. I picked that book up.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I started reading it, and that just helped.
Yeah.
It just gave me language. It gave me understanding to the Bible. Basically, it just says that the Bible is written in 12 different eras, and every era has 4 different periods, and it just breaks it down from Genesis all the way to Revelation.
Wow.
And just breaks it down. And so even today, I'm teaching. They have a group that I disciple now, and we're going through that book now.
Yeah.
So I constantly take people through it because it was revolutionary, just to giving me an understanding. And so that was the thing, it was just, and I just fell in love with God's Word.
Yeah,
and I fell in love with helping others because I knew what it was like to be someone who knew nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like and just like
I can tell now. It's like it was like a honeymoon phase for you, like
it
that
was
kind of
100,
thing. It's awesome to see that in college ministry when like college students pick that up.
Yeah.
So I mean, you eventually, I mean, you got a ministry resume, if you will. Like you're now doing ministry, and you started from that point. How did that journey happen? Like getting into ministry and all that?
Ultimately, I started like learning the Bible, and I was going to different Bible studies on campus. Like I didn't care, I didn't discriminate because, like I said, like my history, like I knew what it's like to have money and wealthy when my dad was playing pro football. So I felt comfortable in affluent circles, right, in majority culture, and then but I also felt comfortable in the hood, right, because we was on welfare, and so I was just like, I want to go to any. I go to any since I was at Campus Crusade, InterVarsity Navigator. I was at a different study every single day because I wanted to grow and I wanted to learn, and it was at that time that I started hearing terms about evangelism and discipleship, and so kind of what led to kind of my call, because I started inviting my friends to these studies, and they was just like, nah, I can't. I'm not feeling they wasn't willing
like
to make the cross cultural jump. It was like the acoustic guitar is just not my vibe. It's just kind of like so I was just like, Lord, I want to create something that I can invite my friends to. And that was that was kind of my call. I want to do something I can invite my friends to. And that's kind of where we started a ministry there, because at the time, the only thing that we had on our campus was, for minorities, specifically African Americans, was a gospel choir.
Okay.
Right. And it
Wow.
was just kind of like, there was a gospel choir, and it was great. I went there all the time, but I couldn't sing. So you didn't really want that to be my primary thing. It says make a joyful noise, and that noise that I was making wasn't that joyful.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it. Wow. Could you describe a little bit of that? I just want to probe into that a little bit more. Just that desire to reach your friends. Yeah, like what? It sounds like you were in a lot of different social circles. I think that's always like maybe a difficulty when we're trying to disciple college students. Is like when they become Christian, you want to introduce them to their Christian friends, but then that has a tendency to like become a bubble, and then they lose all their non-Christian friends, and then they have to do like cold evangelism, and that's way harder. So then, like, how did all that work out for you, where you're able to be in all these different worlds and sort of not get like pulled back into old life, or whatever that, So
Well, I mean,
as a
part of
college
it
student.
was having that, like the grounded, because part of my I was a football player. So as a football player, I already naturally had not just the football team, but athletes. Because, I don't know if you know, but as athletes, we oftentimes call the non-athletes civilians.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
did not know
that's so it's just like the civilians out there, and it's kind of like, because athletes kind of bond, because there's this world that we have, waking up at 5 in the morning and doing all
so much
the stuff that we have to do. And so it was just, so you have the football team, but you have other athletes and all that. So being in that world, but it was oftentimes that in those times I felt very lonely. Being an athlete and being one of the only Christians as an athlete on the football team and all of that. And so, so anytime somebody would come, it's like, hey, I'm a Christian. I would love to talk to your team, like a chaplain or something. It's like, oh, you just talk to D. Lou. You just talk to D. Lou because it was like, he's the only Christian. So that was the thing. But what I realized is that isolation and loneliness that I had ended up becoming a tool and a witness because, when my friends that was on the team, when they really got down on their low, on their, they was just like, where am I going to go? I don't want to go to the guys. I want to talk to somebody that's going to really help me. And then oftentimes there was many guys that came to know the Lord, because of just simply just me being consistent.
Yeah.
Right? Just being consistent in the Lord. And when in the appropriate time, the Lord drew them, too. And so there was those types of conversations, but then I would still have my friends that were believers and all that. And so there was oftentimes that I felt like I would have to bounce back into multiple different worlds.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think the Lord, he sustained me,
Yeah.
During that time. And I was fanatic about it. I was one of those things because
Do you have a nickname? Did they give you a nickname?
Oh, I don't know. They probably called me a lot of stuff, but but like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Reach Records and and all that. And so like when they started, it was 116.
Yeah.
And that's where it all started.
Romans 1:16.
Like we was Romans 1. We are not ashamed. And so we would go around campus, and at the time it was in 98, 99. We were like, we felt we were more like a Christian fraternity and sorority than we were like a Bible study. So we would go in the campus, and if we see somebody who's like, you gotta move, baby. And then if somebody heard, he's like, move, baby, move.
Wow.
And so what we were saying is our ministry was called Men of Virtue and Excellence.
Wow.
Right. And so we said move, and it was an acronym.
Yeah.
And then our women, the Proverbs is like Proverbs 31. So, and they would say with the PV 3131. And so it'd be like, and so that was a thing. So we went around campus.
Yeah.
Like it was like, no, we're more than a Bible study. We're like a fraternity. We're 116. We're unashamed.
Yeah.
We're those radical, all saved, all serious believers.
Yeah.
And we were just on campus.
That's
like
awesome.
we're going. And so that developed a reputation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
that developed a reputation of what we were doing. And it does just, just kind of, God gave us favor. And so by the time I graduated, people from like TCU and Oklahoma and there was just like, what they started hearing about, what are y'all doing down there in North Texas? We heard it. And then it was just like, and at that time I was like, I would love to help people start these.
Yeah.
So I ended up joining a ministry called Impact, which was a part of Crusade, geared towards reaching African Americans, and I did that. And so literally as an intern, I was literally an intern. I would go and start ministries at TCU and Baylor and and that's where I met like John Onwuchekwa and all of them. And then they ended up moving to North Texas and and so it was all of that, but it was just ultimately just saying, hey, we're just being all saved, all serious, unashamed, and just, about it.
Yeah. No, I love that because, I mean, first of all, just college, when college students really catch it, like they catch it, man. And there's just so much that desire to like do something awesome for God and do that with a bunch of friends. And then to like not just like see each other on Sunday, but you're seeing them on campus all the time. And so then you're doing that, like calling each other out a little bit, Hebrews, like 10, as long as called today, you're just like meeting each other. And that's such an amazing incubator for faith. So then you're doing college ministry, but eventually you moved to Atlanta. What was there like how did that happen? How many years was that?
Yeah. So, all right. So in 1999, I graduated,
Okay.
led the ministry through Impact for 2 years. And then I went on staff with a church called Denton Bible Church.
Okay.
And in 2001, did that from 2001 to 2004. So now I'm about 5-6 years removed.
Yeah.
Our college ministry grew, and it got to a point where people were like graduating, but they weren't leaving Denton. And if you know Denton is not like your urban hub. It's more of a college town.
Yeah.
And had the Walmart at the time. But the people started getting married. They started having kids. And it was just like we have a college ministry where we have to have a daycare, right? It's like, this is not a college ministry anymore.
Yeah.
So in 2004, we basically said, we got to start a church, right? And it just kind of like, all right, well, let's start a church. And so that's what we did. We started a church called Lifeline Bible Fellowship. And we did that for some years. And at that time, people, that's when like Reach Records started becoming, and people were like, oh, you need to, you're both culturally relevant, but you're doctrinally sound. And like, where'd you get it from? And it was like, Denton. And it was just like, Denton. And so we just started dreaming. So from 2004 and at 2007, we just said, all right, Lord, are you calling us somewhere else? And so December 15th of 2007, my wife and I said, all right, we feeling called to go plant a church in Atlanta. And when we made that commitment, 25 others says, well, if you guys go, we're going with you.
Wow.
And so 25 people ended up moving to Atlanta, and then that number jumped to about 40 that moved to Atlanta. And so,
these are all people like discipled under you.
Yeah, all people. So during that time, 35 of the 40 people lived in our home.
Oh,
yeah. So like personally lived in our home at some point in time.
That's crazy.
Because, and that was it. Because when we talk about discipleship, it's like it's about discipleship. It's about disciple making, you know, because I feel like that was the missing piece in a lot of ways. That people was just like, yeah, I'm a Christian. Just go to church, kind of sit in the pew. It was like, no. It's like there's this thing called the Great Commission. Like, let's did anybody? Because listen, because here it was. I'm in this campus ministry, and I'm hearing things like discipleship and evangelism. I was just like, this must be a secret. Like, people must not know about this because no one's talking about it. Like, because I'm like, these are terms that no one's saying. Like, to them, Christianity was like, don't go to the club, don't drink, don't have sex outside of marriage, don't join a fraternity. Don't. I was like, stop it with all the don't do's. I was just like, evangelism, discipleship. And then I started talking to people. I was like, man, there's this term in the Bible that's calling us to go make a disciples. I was like, yeah, I know. I was just like, well, then why are you not doing it? I was like, why is no one making disciples?
Yeah.
And that's really where we just said, like, all right, well, like, this is about discipleship. This is about disciple making. And that's really what it's become about. And so, like, in 2001, the Lord, like, just really put this in my spirit because I would go and I felt like this third culture kid. It was like either I was around a group of people who understood my context, but they didn't have their same commitment to theology and mission, or I was around people who understood theology and mission, but they didn't understand my context. And I was just like, Lord, I feel like I'm just this third culture kid. No one gets me, right? And I'm just lonely and isolated. And I was just like, I want to be the last generation to leave the urban context for sound discipleship.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what does it look like to make discipleship accessible in every urban context? And that was the commitment I made in 2001. And that's really, for the last 25 years, has been about that when and disciple making and, and bringing it in the urban context.
Yeah. Could you, because I think, like in your experience, people aren't even using the word discipleship. I think today it's a little different where discipleship gets thrown around a lot, but the understanding of what discipleship is doesn't sound like 35 people living in your home, And so if you could just if you were to define discipleship and I think that today a lot of people throw around the word discipleship and what they mean is like curriculum. or they mean a group of people telling each other to do stuff they already should be doing. It doesn't look like 35 people living in your home. So if you could just define discipleship and talk about how that plays out at
Well, one of the things, and it
Blueprint.
comes through this concept of discipleship, is two things. I was saying too many of us have reduced discipleship to mentorship. Mentorship is an aspect of discipleship, but it's not all of discipleship.
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
Like, because a lot of times people think about discipleship as just the one-on-one or the one-on-3
I see.
or even the one-on-12. And I was just like, yes, like that is an aspect, because Jesus had the 3, Jesus had the 12, right? But you know what? Jesus also had 70.
Yeah.
And I was like, would anybody call 1-on-70 discipleship, right? Yeah. And so I was just like, so there's a problem either with our frameworks of what discipleship and what we're doing, and and all that. So I said, but the other thing was, like, I would talk to pastors, and I would say, what is your plan for discipleship in your church? And they would always say, ultimately, they would talk about, well, discipleship is basically a once-a-week meeting at Starbucks where I'm going to ask you about your life. I get the best book out at the current time, and I get this once-a-week meeting. And I was just like, that's discipleship. And I was just like, I just wanted to be committed to, like, I just read the Bible, and I see what Christ was called. And I was just like, and I just want to reproduce that. And I was just like, here's the thing. Jesus was the only man who walked the earth that had the fullness of the Spirit of God, right? If, like, he's the only person that had what the Bible says, the pleroma of God, right? That he is both God's ideal man and man's ideal God, right? In him, he's the God man, right? But for the rest of us, right? If I say just simply follow me, all I'm going to do is make a lopsided mini-me of myself. Where we're going to get all my flaws and all my things. But Jesus is the only pure, like all. But the Bible says that if you want to see the pleroma of God, the fullness of God, in the where do we go? You don't go to one individual. You have to go to the church. It says in Ephesians chapter 3, 10, it says the manifold wisdom, the multifaceted wisdom of God is displayed in the church. And so when I talk about discipleship, my definition is this. It's our capacity to lovingly embody the person and work of Jesus and to transfer him into the life of others.
Wow.
Right? And so if you hear that, I start with our capacity. What I'm saying is it starts with the local church.
Yeah.
The idea of the disciple making is not a ministry of the church. It is the ministry of the church, that we are called to be disciple makers. So it's our capacity where you see the pleroma, the manifold wisdom of God being displayed, where you got apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers coming together to bring. There's an old African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. And ultimately what we're saying is that if it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a church to raise a Christian. It takes a community, right? And so that's where, so it's community-based, where there's different. You may have the gift of evangelism, you may have the gift of helps, you may have the gift of administration, you have the gift of, and we all come together for the purpose of helping them make disciples. So it's our capacity to lovingly embody the person and work of Jesus, right? Who has the fullness of God, and to transfer him into the life of others. And so that is kind of what we talk about is our definition of discipleship. But then I would say the mechanics of discipleship is simple. It's simply inviting people into relationship and challenging them to change. Okay. And that is ultimately comes from Matthew chapter 4:19, where Jesus says, follow me. Invitation into relationship, and you will become fishers of men. That what we're saying is that if you follow me, you will become something. You will be formed, you will be shaped, you will be challenged to becoming something. And I think as believers, as some of us, when we talk about discipleship, it's like we're either all invitation and no challenge, or all challenge and no invitation. But discipleship is both and. It's both invitation and challenge. And so, and I think once we basically just says, hey, everybody plays a part. Big football guy, played football, all of the things. And I was like, the goal of football is what?
Score touchdowns.
Score touchdowns, right? That's the goal. That's the goal of football, score touchdowns. But we do recognize that you can go your whole career. There's some positions you can go your whole career and never, ever score a touchdown. Does that mean you've had an unsuccessful career?
No.
No. Why? Because we recognize that people like guards, centers, and tackles, their position is not designed to score touchdowns. But we also know that if guards, centers, and tackles don't block, there's no touchdowns being scored, right? And so I think that's the thing that we have to understand, that if we reduce discipleship to mentorship, where I teach you one-on-one or one-on-three, where the Bible says, don't let all of you become teachers. Then I got to also understand, well, what about the gift of, how does the gift of hospitality help me to make disciples? How does the gift of administration, how does the gift of helps, how does the variety of different gifts help us to make disciples holistically? And so when we talk about the church and the community, there's so much more than just simply the once a week meeting where I'm going to teach you something that is the breadth. And so we try to make a robust picture where everybody belongs and everybody matters. So I take it from the me to the we. When we're talking about discipleship.
I love that, because that's something we talk about all the time. That it's not, it's the village, it's the whole ecosystem of relationships. We talk about we not me and our way of life and all of that. And I think that's something that is not emphasized enough. Sadly, like not central enough in sort of the American picture of Christianity. So it's really encouraging actually to hear that vision from like someone other than us, and hear that from you. And so I could see how that informed a lot of like what you guys did when you planted Blueprint. You planted not just you and your wife moving out, on this heroic quest. You went with 40 other people. What were some other things that you guys did intentionally in planning the church, and some other things that you said, like, we're going to do it this way, that, corresponded with discipleship?
Well, there's a lot of things that we thought we were going to do, but we didn't end up doing, because it's like, the old famous Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? You get punched in the mouth. So we got punched in the mouth, and he's like, okay, well, maybe this is not that plan that we...
What happened?
So in 2008 is when we moved,
okay,
right? Like 2008 is when most of us moved. We're looking down, but if, in 2009 is when we actually moved. If you remember 2008 was the house... crisis. So basically there was no jobs.
Oh man.
People were moving there. They had no place to live.
Oh man.
And so at first it's like, let's all move into a specific neighborhood, a specific place. And then it was just like, they ended up getting scattered everywhere because people was like, I'm still going, but I don't know.
I can't move into that
neighborhood. I can't move into that neighborhood. I can't move. And so we just started spreading out. But like we wanted to be very local, very intentional. And so things like that, like, so we went in with this plan, but we had people all sign covenants. We says, hey, listen, like, I'm not Moses, right? Like, you're not going to blame me. Like, if stuff goes bad, hard, like, why'd you bring me way out here? So we would literally make them sign an initial, like, life is going to be harder. It's going to do it. Like, and we would just walk them through this document, of just saying, you have to sign each one if you're coming with us. And so it's things like that that we were saying, because ultimately we says, count the cost. The principle was count the cost before you come in, because we're about discipleship. We're about disciple making. We're going to go make disciples, and life is not going to get easier. It maybe even be harder, right? In order to do that, and so that's really kind of things like that. But then when we were there, it was like what the Lord did is He took it and He still blessed it. Like
could you share some of the bright spots?
Well, it was just things like just when we got there, just the ability, like people were just inviting people into their homes, right? Like I told you, 35 out of the 40 people lived with our homes, and we never did messages on like, you got to have people live with you and all that. But like early on in the life of Blueprint, everybody had people living in their home. It was just something that discipleship is more caught than taught. Right. And they were 100%. Like, man, they had people living in their homes, and they had people coming, and people as they were coming in, and it just built this bond, this community that we were on mission together. Right. Oftentimes people aim for community and they never get to the mission, but we was about mission and we got community out of it. Wow. And it was just one of those things that just the Lord really blessed, and people were coming, coming to know the Lord, and people were coming and being a part of the church. Early this, we went to Atlanta. First of all, we was introduced to Atlanta with a tornado. Like, tornadoes do not come in Atlanta, but we were driving in and literally in the middle of downtown. I was like, Lord, is this a sign? Do we need to turn around and go the other way? So there was like a tornado come, and then we went in when we first started service. It was one of the coldest winters ever in Atlanta. And so it was just like, okay, Lord. But going through those hard times, going through those sufferings, going through like together was just like, man, that bonded us so much together, and so oftentimes when people think about, all right, it's got to be, the joyful times were the easy times. But no, it was the joyful times was just us remembering like, oh, we
Yeah.
in this thing. We grinding together,
Yeah,
but doing
yeah.
it together.
Yeah.
Not isolated. It wasn't just me and my wife trying to rough it
Yeah.
together, but it was like we had friends, we had people, we had community
Yeah.
that was around. So the beautiful thing is that over the first 10 years of our church, we were about being a church that's planting other churches. That's why we named the church Blueprint, right? The definition of a blueprint is a plan or a process that's used as a guide to start something new. And so we wanted to see more churches planted. And so like at a time we were sending out a new church every single year, sending. But it hurt because people were just like, I'm not gonna get to know anybody because why would I keep knowing people if I'm just gonna send them? Like I'm not gonna get close to anybody. And so those are like the struggles, the challenges. Like it looks great and it feels great to kind of say, oh, we're a sending church and all these people, but it's like it's painful relationally because you know that as much as you don't want it to be, relationships are gonna change, right? And that impacts. And so grieving those relationships and like losing those relationships, like some of those relationships not, and just all of those things. There's both, and we've learned the idea of joy with sadness.
Yeah. I mean, I think we experience the same kinds of tensions. I would love to have everyone together and just be all together. But then we have to like send, right? And so we're wrestling with that tension of like covenant, but then we're also have to be on mission. And then how do we continue to keep those relationships if we can, like farther apart. And so wrestling through those same things. But just that idea of togetherness you were talking about too reminds me of something we like to say, which is like, if your car breaks down in the middle of like the country or whatever, that's nightmare, but if you have your friends there, then it becomes an adventure. And those tough things you go through are things you can laugh about later on. And so, yeah, man, so inspiring to hear about. But so then like My Boulevard, like where does that come into the story and what exactly is that? And,
so we were crazy. So we were 2010 we started the church. 2011 we decided to start this ministry called, at the time it was called Rebuild, and it was basically talking about rebuild the city, right? How do we rebuild the city? By planting other churches. And so we started a church planting side because that's the reason why most of it was going. To start churches and to plant churches in urban cities. Like we wanted to embrace the beauty and the complexity, the density and diversity of city, right? We was just like we are going to urban environments, the places that no one goes to. We want to go there. And so, we started this network. We started at the time, it started off as a training. So in 2011, there's a group in St. Louis that decided that we'll trust these idiots, right? Who's been here for a whole year of planting.
Well, you went through a tornado.
Like we went through a tornado. We went through all, so we have all the experience now, right? And so we we trained them to start a church, and then. That was 2011, 2012. Like now, 9 other churches started in 2013, 13 other, and they were just kind of like, these couples kept coming and planting churches all across the urban context, was like, come and train. And so we had that pipeline going where we're training people. And so over the course, we was able to train over 100 church planners, church planting couples to plant churches in urban environments all across the country. But then while we also had our own incubator and Blueprint that we were raising up staff and sending them out to plant churches. And so we would send a group of people, the couple and a group of people along with them to go plant in the different areas. And we did that for these years, like again, one church a year. And so, so that's what it became Rebuild. We were doing that in urban environments. And then there was this group called the Sin Network. You guys are familiar with that. And they were like, hey, we want to come alongside you and do that. And so I started off and I was like, well, I'll help you with the urban side because that's what I'm passionate about. And I did that for a few years. And then in 2015, they was just like, hey, can we bring you on staff? And I was just like, I don't really trust you like that. But but I was like, all right, let's do it. You want to help fund the mission and all that. So let's do it. And I really trusted Kevin Izell and some of the leadership that was there at the time. And so I came on staff in 2015 and it was able to create. And so I went from training 10 people every year to 30 people every year, right? Because I had staff to help
and that was MyBLVD
and then we changed it, and that was the time when we changed the name from Rebuild to Boulevard, because I kept Rebuild because I was like, I don't know if I really trust y'all like that, right? You know, like, just in case, I don't know. So we Boulevard, that's why we changed the Boulevard. So it really came out of a little bit of a lack of trust there. And so we did that for a few years.
If you don't mind me asking, what was like the trust part? It was just because, like, I don't see anyone else doing it. No one else is doing urban.
So first of all, because I wasn't raised in the church.
Yeah.
And then I started hearing about Southern Baptists.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I was like, Southern and Baptist, right? And I was just like, okay, I don't get it. But, like, here's the truth. And they know this about me. And I said, the only thing I know about Southern Baptists is that you guys hate blacks, gays, and Disney. Right. Yeah. And I was just like, that's the reputation. That's the reputation. And then when somebody started telling me, no, what Southern Baptist really is, it's a bunch of autonomous churches putting their money into a pot for the purpose of missions. And I was just like, okay, first we need to fire the marketer. Yeah. Whoever's marketing, fire them.
The PR.
And then, like, the PR people. And then, like, get this message out. Because I was like, I get that.
Yeah.
I was like, I get that. And so, but I was still kind of hesitant.
Yeah.
I was still kind of hesitant. So I was just like, all right. So I was like, I'll come on. I was a contractor for so many years. And then Sin Network started getting, I was like, all right. Like, they was officially naming it Sin Network. Yeah. At first it was just Sin Cities. And in 2015, Sin Network. And I was just like, and they brought me on staff to increase my capacity.
Well, I mean, eventually you became the president of Sin Network.
That was 2015. 2018. So I was doing that for 3 years, this training kind of urban. Yeah. In 2018, the vice president stepped down, and it was just like, you need to be the one to run it, Dhati. Wow. And I was just like, whoa, you know. And so I led it from 2018 to 2022.
Yeah. So the Sin Network, like, maybe you could describe what it is, its scale, its impact. I mean, when you were leading it,
So Sin Network is the largest church planting organization in North America.
Yeah.
You know, and it is. You know, we were planting over 600 churches every year, you know, all across the country.
Just to help people understand, like, what's in terms of other church planting organizations, are they planning at that rate?
Oh, no, I think you can combine all the other church planters in North America, and Sin Network would still be planting more. Wow. If you combine all the other networks together. And so it's Southern Baptist, 45,000 churches putting the money in the pot for the purpose of mission. And so Kevin Azale in 2010 basically put all the money and says, hey, we're going to be about church planting. So he takes this budget and puts it to the purpose of church planting. And so I was just like, yes, I want to do that. I want to help leverage that. And my whole thought was, I want to leverage it for the purpose of urban.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And so again, my goal has always been last generation to leave the urban context. And so 2018 through 2022, I was just like, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. Like, let's do it. And, you know, and so we kept on doing, and that was the one thing I never stopped training urban church planters, even as a VP.
That's awesome. Cause I mean, just looking, some people might not know, but the history of cities in the U.S., you know, it's always been people moving out. You know, and social capital, everything like moving out of the cities, and that it even includes discipleship and churches, right? Because how else are you going to fund your church, you know? And so trying to put that, like, to bring the church back in. I remember there was a moment when I planted in Philly, and we were getting like this tour of all the Philly colleges, and there's a pastor who was taking us around, and he was talking about all that, like, sort of the drain away from the cities. And one of my younger staff raised his hand and said, "So, like, what are people doing about this? How are we gonna, like, bring discipleship and church back to the city?" And the pastor looked at him and said, "You, and that's why you moved here, right?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's." So yeah, but so I mean, you're leading Sin Network, and it's this huge operation. I mean, you've got this amazing position, but then you left that post, and was that a hard decision?
It wasn't hard. Yeah. It was. I love what I was doing with Sin Network, but it wasn't hard in the sense, because really, I just started asking the Lord. I was like, God, are you calling me to be Esther? Are you releasing me to be Paul? And I was just like, Lord, I'll continue to maintain this position in order to leverage it for the people that I care about. Because again, we're planting all these churches, but honestly, like, my heart is urban. Yeah. And I was just like, man, praise the Lord for the cowboy church and the motorcycle church and all these other things. But I was just like, but God, that's not really, like, praise the Lord that the gospel is going. Yeah. But for me, it's about urban, right? And so I just went and I approached Kevin, and I was like, I just really feel like my call is for urban. I enjoy this. I love this. I love what we're doing and what we get to do, but like, I want to focus. I want to refocus in urban. And so in 2022, I stepped down, and I was just like, Lord, I want to give the rest of my ministry life to focusing on urban, right? I don't know what in the, bleep I was thinking and doing, because I was like the resources, I didn't have any of that, but I was just like, Lord, this is what I want to commit the rest of my life. And so, and I was just like, I had passion.
Yeah,
right?
I was just about to bring that up, because so passion is this word you used during the plenary and during your workshop, and when you talked about passion, your definition really stood out to me. A lot of people call me a passionate guy, and what they mean by that is I get a lot of people to jump up and down, and I cry at a lot of things and whatever, I have a lot of emotions, whatever. But you used a very different definition of passion. Could you just
it really got it from Chip Dodd, and Chip basically what he talked about passion is a willingness to endure the pain for something that's greater than the pain, right? And I think that is something that we see in the passion of the Christ, the passion of like I must, and I think I oftentimes think about like why in the world does women want to continue to get pregnant? Like 10 months of labor, right? Like why?
Yeah.
Because it's passion, right? They know there's something greater than the pain, right? And I was just like, that was it. It was this passion, like a willingness to endure pain for something that's greater. So it's not just being the loudest, most extroverted person in the room or the loudest person, but it's about people who are willing to endure pain and suffering for something that's greater. It's going through two-a-days so that I can go win a championship or go play. Like, we endure pain for so many things. And I was just like, Lord, this is what I want to give my life. And so that's what we did. We stepped down and we started a ministry called MyBLVD. And so that's where, if you see the iteration, went from Rebuild to Boulevard to MyBLVD. And MyBLVD is just simply, it's urban missionaries making disciples where they live, work, and worship. We want to reject passivity and accept responsibility where we live, where we work and worship. And so the thought is like, we can't, as urban missionaries, people who are raised in urban, people who are come from urban, like, let's stop waiting for God to drop somebody else into our neighborhoods, right? What does it look like for us to take responsibility, right? Indigenous leaders, indigenous people who were born, who was raised, in these environments to create. And I was just like, I want to spend the rest of my born again life, rest of my life to like empowering these leaders to make disciples. Because there's a reason why people don't go to urban. There's a reason why people don't go. But here's the thing. It's the largest mission field in North America, right? That there's more people live in urban than live in suburban and rural right now, right? Here's the thing that we see, this idea, they say by the year 2050, right? I'll be 75 years old in the year 2050. They say 90%, projected 90% of Americans will live in urban.
Wow.
But do you know that there's not one seminary in North America where you can get a D-Miss or a D-Min or a PhD in urban missiology, right, in North America. But it's, it's urban centers right now. They're already the top. If you look at the top 30, they're already majority minority. When you look at urban, what you see is that these are historically vote blue. When you look at minority, they're at least evangelical, evangelized, all of these things. And it was just like, God, did you somehow forget about the urban context in America? Like, why are we not discipling? Why are we not training? Why are we not raising up leaders for the urban context? And I was just like, I want to be a part of the solution of that. I want to spend my primary energy, because what happens is that when I was a part of a majority culture, and again, I love my time with them, but I had to spend most of my time on giving you an apologetic of why urban. And I was like, I couldn't spend the best of my time on how to make disciples in urban, right? And I was just
trying
like,
to make the case,
just trying to make a case, just doing the work and the nuances of it. And so I was just like, no, I want to spend my time focusing on the nuances of helping urban practitioners who are not trying to convince them, but to be missionaries in the context, and to embrace this idea that you don't have to be a missionary going overseas. Praise the Lord, and let's keep on raising up and sending missionaries overseas. But what about us being missionaries where we live, where we work, and where we worship? And how can we do that in urban contexts, in urban environments? And so that's really what it's about. And so MyBLVD is a family of urban missionaries. And so when we talk about missionaries, we say missionaries are 4 types of missionaries. They're either poets, right? And these are people who use their arts.
Yeah.
So like my brother, Sho Baraka, he is one of our urban missionaries. He's he does things, producing good culture, and he has initiatives. So that's one.
And cities being that center of culture.
The center of culture.
Sure.
Pastors, and these are people who anybody who's utilizing the church as their primary vehicle to make disciples, right, or to make an impact. We got practitioners, and these are for-profit leaders, non-profit leaders, right, that are utilizing their, platforms to make disciples. And then we have polymaths. These are multidisciplined, multi-learned, multi-skilled people who are using. And so what we say is that as we're no longer just a church planting organization, we are a missions organization where we're bringing our missionaries together for the purpose of making an impact where they live, work, and worship. And so we're able to bring the artists together to talk to the pastors and the practitioners to talk to the polymaths and get them all in a room. So we did that. And so over the last couple of years, we just really commissioned 54. We have 54 missionaries now that are all across North America, all across America. And that's where, but they're all ministering in urban environments.
Wow.
And specifically majority minority spaces, because again, that's where we feel like the greatest the greatest lack is. Because a lot of times when a missions organization says most of our people are non-Anglo, they're talking about reaching, like a lot of times, first-gen immigrants. But who's reaching the second generation, third generation minorities, right? That are English speaking, and all that. That's the forgotten, in a lot of this. And so it's like we want to intentionally target that demographic, that group, in terms of where we're trying to make disciples.
And I could see the tie in terms of like even your upbringing, being that third culture kid, and sort of reaching, because I'm one of those English speaking second generation, and even Pastor Ed kind of saw that there needed to be a spiritual leader for those people. And I think so much of our network's growth came from just that simple, like someone needs to lead those people, and I'm just so thankful that is. And so, the other aspect I'm seeing is, you talked about embracing the complexity of the city and realizing that you need all these types of people to reach the city, because the city is so complex. There's so many challenges. It's going to take more than just like a pastor to do that, right? And then finally, just like you're seeing the trends of where society demographics are going, and instead of the church always falling behind that, trying to get ahead of it and trying to get us like arrange the chessboard, if you will, so that we can like play the game, So just on that note, and maybe we can, as we near the end of this conversation, as you think about the future and how everything's going to become more urban and complex and majority minority, all of that, what do you think are like the top 3 challenges for the church to like engage in discipleship in that context? I can think of a bunch, but
Well, I would think the number one challenge is like we're in a world like, a lot of times I think about like there's modernity, right? Like the idea of truth, right? A race for truth. Who has the truth? And it was just like, if we can find and define what truth is, that was modernity. That led us to multiple world wars, right? But then there was post-modernity, right? And it was kind of like my truth, your truth, relativism, right? And all that. But then now we're in a time where it's kind of this idea of, and again, it's kind of like, regardless of what, like this kind of anti-truth or CRT in a sense. And what I mean by that is, it's not just CRT, critical race theory, but it's critical theory, right? And so it's not just about like, if your truth disagrees with my truth, then you are an enemy, right? If your difference is like, and so we start as enemies. And I think the number one thing as missionaries, as we go into this next generation, we have to recapture the art of hospitality, right? And Henry Nouwen talks about hospitality as the space that you create to make an enemy a friend.
Wow.
Right. And I think that is something that we have to do. Because if I go out, if I just simply say I'm a Bible believing Christian, you know what, right now, if you say that, like if you go on like the podcast and say, I'm a Bible believing Christian, they're going to say, well, you're a xenophobe or homophobe, and they're already going to assign all of these phobes to you.
These labels.
These labels to you because you're thinking. So if as soon as I say that, you make me an enemy, I have to recapture the hospitality to allow you to go from an enemy to a sibling.
Wow.
Right. And so I got to create space. in order for that to take place. And I think as urban missionaries, we got to learn how to do that, is to recapture the art of hospitality, right? It's a biblical mandate, but, it's something that oftentimes is lost. Is like, how do we welcome people? So I think that is one where it's just simply not like the person who's trying to scream the loudest, or take the strongest stance or whatever. It's just like, we got to think like a missionary, right? We got to think like a missionary, and Paul says it in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I become all things to all men so that I might save some, right? It's just like that concept of like not losing your identity, but being able to understand your identity in the place where you can still create space for other people to find out and to allow their identity to be formed, right, and giving them time to do that. So I think that's going to be critical, right? And I think, one of the things that if you look at the history, that our times are very similar to the early late 60s, early 70s. In 68, right, when you had the hippie movement and all that,
revolution,
all that, and it was like, oh, we don't like institutions and all the things, which we're going through that right now, the distrust of institutions and all of that. And then what happened, if you remember, what came after that movement? As soon as that came, it got so wicked. The holiness movement came. And that's when homeschooling and all of that. And I think what you're going to see is this pendulum swing, because people was just like, all right, now y'all getting crazy out here. We're talking about whether or not you're a dog. We're talking about whether or not, it's crazy out in these streets nowadays. And now they're basically are like, people are just like, all right, this is enough.
Yeah, some people, there's rejection of that. Yeah.
And then now it's gonna be like this strict holiness. And I think the church, we can't get tossed to and fro by every trick or win. We gotta, remember, it's the truth of the gospel that we have good news. And so how do we speak truth with love? How do we, and think like a missionary? And so instead of arguing whether or not critical theory is a thing or not, why don't we just understand that is the day? No one was questioning whether or not relativism, right? That was the air that we were breathing. Your truth, my truth. And it was just like, and so God raised up missionaries to try to engage in relativism. And I think it's the same way. It's like, let's stop worrying about whether or not the validity of CT, critical theory. Let's just say, no, that's the day that we are in. Right. And so how do we raise up missionaries to win people, in this time and for such a time as this? And I think those are the types of things that God needs to raise up missionaries. And my prayer is that we would raise up missionaries, because here's the thing. Our cities are already majority minority. Like, we don't have to wait till the year 2045. Year 2045, America will become a majority minority country.
Future is here,
right?
Is already here.
Yeah, that future in cities is already here. And if you see, like even this past election, if you see what's taking place, is that you have the cities vote blue. And the suburbs or rural vote red. Right? And there's this a completely different culture. It's just like, well, does God care about the cities? Does God care about raising up missionaries for the cities? And I was just like, man, that's where I was raised. And I tell people, I'm not suffering for the Lord by living in the city. Like, even if I was a non-believer, I would prefer to live in the city than live in the suburbs and rural areas. And I think that God needs to raise up missionaries, urban missionaries, people who are just like, no, this is my people. This is where I'm from. And God will continue to use both but this is what this is about. And so that's what I would say, like, as we look into the future, we got to recapture the art of hospitality, because people are lonely. They're desperate. They want community, relationship, right? We got to create spaces where people can belong and matter, right? That's the two greatest needs that we all have, is belonging and mattering. And in the gospel, we get both, right? That we are adopted into God's family, and he's given us a commission to go and to be a part. And so we got to stop arguing about the color of carpet. We got to stop arguing about CT or not. We got to stop arguing about the stuff that we're spending all of our time staying away from, making disciples, doing what God has called us to do. And I think that is critical. So we have to keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah. Wow. So just trying to keep the church, like, of course we have to be holy, but we can't be a bubble. We need to keep engaging the world. And I love that definition, just creating space where your enemy can become your friend. And just to end, I mean, I think you've said so much that resonates with our network and our ethos and our DNA. Man, just maybe even going back to the idea of passion. We have our church is pretty young, our network's pretty young, but then, a lot of times we think of passion as just like emotional, and just hearing your story. I mean, earlier you shared during the plenary and the workshop, you shared a lot of things that you've gone through, and I have to confess, like when I was like, wow, like first I thought, okay, that's Dhati and Andrew, you guys are the real deal, the other end, I also felt like y'all just built different, like the kind of stuff you went through, so maybe how do we, it's gonna be, it's everything you painted is a very exciting vision, but it's gonna be a challenge for the church to step into it. And I get a feeling that if we're creating spaces for our enemies to become friends, that's gonna call us into suffering. How can we grow in passion? How can we do that? And maybe that can be a parting word of encouragement to us as a network, and as we try to disciple.
All right, so I spent 20 plus years, and I still do it today, that I beat my body up, and I do a thing called weightlifting and working out, and I don't know, it's still to this day, like, why do I do this to myself, right?
You don't enjoy it? You're not
I'm not one of those people that's like,
really?
I enjoy working out. I do it because I need to stay in shape. I need to, but here's the thing. I intentionally put myself in it, and I stay in it because I know the benefits of it. But the reason why I'm able to stay in it is because I never do it alone. And I would say part of my encouragement is that, like, if you want to see other eagles, you can't just go outside and look at birds, right? Like eagles, you have to take sacrifice to go see where eagles are.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing, is that if you need to find and be around other passionate people. And when you have people who are sold out, it's not about giftings. It's not about all of the things. It's about people who are willing to endure pain for something that's greater than the pain. People who are willing to suffer for something that's more important. And so I would just say, like, get around other people that are passionate, and what I love about it is in Exodus chapter 17, God told Moses, he says, go on top of that hill. And I want you to take a staff with you. And when you lift up the staff above your arms, right, the people of Israel, they'll be winning the war. Your people, they'll win the war. But as soon as that staff comes down, you lose the war. If you look at that, God gave Moses an impossible task. Because if you think about it, wars don't happen over like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Wars can take hours. It can take days. Right. And just think about, and not only did he give him an impossible test, he gave him something that with life or death consequences.
Yeah.
So like every time his hands came down, when you're losing the war, it's not like losing a football game. That means somebody's dying.
Yeah. Wow.
So think about that type of weight, that type of pressure, that I'm going into this to do something that I know I can't do, and then that has life or death consequences. That when my hands come down, you're like, I may lose a loved one.
Yeah.
I'm losing loved ones. What Moses does, I think, is a beautiful picture of the gospel and being able to remain in passion even in the midst of hard times and suffering. What Moses does is that in Acts chapter 17, the first thing he does is that he sits on the rock. And I believe that's a picture of our salvation, that we sit on the rock of Christ. Upon this rock, I will build my church, right? He sits and he rests. And it's like we rest in Jesus. But then what the other thing that happens in that passage is that he brought up her and Joshua. And so when he had his arms up, when he became weak, on one side, Joshua on the other, they lifted his arms up. And I think, and he was able to endure even in the midst and able to accomplish something he could not do on his own, right? And I think that as we're going into these mission fields and as we're going into, there's going to be times like God has given us an impossible task for us to do, but it has life or death consequences. Eternity is at stake, and so we have to find our ways. How do we rest in Jesus, in the person and work of his salvation, rest in him through the power of his Holy Spirit? And how do we bring our Aarons and our Joshua, our Urs, that is on the right and on the left, that's holding us up, so when we become weak, they're our strength. And I think that's what I just want to encourage us, right? Because the task that you guys are on, the task that we are on, if you are on mission for God, it's going to get, not if, you're going to get fatigued, you're going to get tired. So learn natural rest, natural times of sabbaticaling and resting, but also like trust in Jesus and have your hers and your Joshuas that lift you up when you're weak.
Wow. That's so good, man. So Acts2 Network, rest in Jesus. And we don't have to be awesome. We just need to be together and suffer through it together. And I think we can do that. Yeah, I think we can do that. And just thank you so much again for that word. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your encouragement and support of our network. I think we're just so. I just feel so humbled and privileged. Like I feel like I'm interviewing a real hero of faith. So thank you so much, really. And we'll end the conversation there. Again, thanks for your time. And like, subscribe, tune into future episodes. And again, thank you so much.
Amen. Thank you.